Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, we're going to have a lively one here on Sunday. John Middlekauff, our week 2 reaction presented by Uber Eats. Get almost anything for game day. Former NFL scout John Middlekauff as we start today. Let's start Kansas City, Cincinnati. You know, it's funny. I've argued this forever that Bill Parcells used to ride Phil Simms. Phil, throw it down the field. Okay, I'm not interested in, one interception, no picks. Today Mahomes has 2 ugly picks, almost had 3. Burrow has none, and Kansas City wins. And by the way, in his opener against Baltimore, it was one of the ugliest picks, not named Will Levis, Mahomes against Baltimore. And it's funny about Kansas City is that, we think of Kansas City as so efficient, but they make a lot of mistakes, John. They are vulnerable. They give you opportunities, but they're always usually good starting a game and finishing. In the middle of it, it can get choppy. But once again, late, like against Baltimore, they finished Cincinnati off. I felt terrible for Cincinnati in a way because at one point in this game, they put up a graphic that the last 6 matchup between these two teams, Bengals Chiefs, they'd each scored 150 points. Like,
crazy.
It is so even. But I guess my takeaway is Cincinnati can go toe-to-toe with Kansas City forever. But Kansas City has this ability to start and end quickly, and they're a flawed team, right? Like when I watch them, I think, God, they give you opportunities, don't they?
Well, big picture, I don't know how Kansas City, after winning back-to-back Super Bowls, can take these type games week in and week out without eventually running out of juice. That felt like a playoff game, didn't it? The intensity, the physicality, that was I had because the Arizona-LA game ended so fast. That thing was over 5 minutes into the game. The Steelers versus the Broncos on one TV and the Chiefs, it was like 2 different sports being played in those 2 games. I do think for whatever reason that graphic kind of illustrated it. Cincinnati plays this team better than anyone. They beat them in the playoffs. They went toe-to-toe with them a couple years ago. Easily could have beat them again in the playoffs. Probably, they're going to be kicking themselves. Should have won this game. I hate to see the game decided on a late penalty.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I just think at the end of the day, the Chiefs' culture completely flipped when they traded Tyreek Hill, and they have this physical kind of, they're a defensive team. Spagnuolo is just brilliant. They are going through some growing pains starting a rookie left tackle. Because so many teams now, you just watch around the NFL, even the bad teams have pass rushers, and they move them around. They're going to put them over that kid every single week. And Mahomes, luckily, he's a great scrambler. Kelce looks his age. He's no longer, and he's kind of saving himself for the end of the season, and they did that again last year. But God, he's no longer, I would say, the week in, week out dominant player.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote down 3 plays in this game because I started it was a close game. So I'm like, I'm going to write down the big plays in the fourth quarter. Mahomes to Kelce, huge gainer. 3rd and 6, trailing 25-23. Kansas City gets that Spags blitz sack. Late flag on Cincinnati. The 3 big plays to me all went in Kansas City's favor. They remind me a little bit like an old KG boxer, like Sugar Ray Leonard out of his prime. They win the end of the round. You get shots at them. You may knock them down. It's not always aesthetically pleasing, but they kind of figure out how to manipulate the judges, manipulate the game. You see this in the NBA with old teams, that they just have a way of figuring out how to play the game late. There's an art to football at the end of a game and using your timeouts and field position. The Chiefs do not give you a 10 out of 10 performance. Boy, but in the big moments, John, that's where Kelce's great last year in the playoffs. He was huge in the red zone, huge on 3rd or 4th down. And I think that's what they are. They are, as they go through growing pains, they're still the great closing team in this sport.
Well, they're not as phased as much as, remember 2 years ago, Mahomes went through an awful stretch where he had a bunch of turnovers and they were playing bad. I think this was not last year, but 2 years ago. And now they still have that happen, but their defense is so good.
Yeah.
They're just such good open field tacklers. I thought also, they don't mentally crack. They ended up still kicking a field goal, but Jamar Chase freaking out about a hip drop. Bro, he grabbed you by your shoulder pads and then he let you down. Like, relax.
Yeah.
And Joe Burrow has known him forever, is like trying to come, and he won't listen to anybody. And that kind of
Yep.
ultimately wasn't the difference in the game, but that doesn't happen to Kansas City.
Yep.
If anything, they get the guy off the field. They're not giving up 15 free yards and let Andy or whoever yell at each other, but they're not yelling at the ref in that spot.
No,
And
that's right.
Jamar Chase, I mean, beside Burrow I mean, he's one of their best players, one of the better players in the league. You cannot lose your shit like that in that spot. It's really unacceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
Yeah, I felt like Cincinnati sort of lost this game. Not that Kansas City didn't make plays. They deserve it. They're impossible to me to root against because I really, again, I liked old fighters and I like teams that are great in the clutch. There's a New England quotient. Like you feel like sometimes, do they have the best players out here today?
Don't they feel like the Patriots the way they play now, like that dynasty? They didn't early on with Tyreek. They do now.
Yeah, like the bottom line is they're more physical. They have a better coach. Their quarterback's better in crisis, and they don't beat themselves. Now, dramatically, they're much more fun to watch, I think, than New England was outside of the Randy Moss years. But it's very much best coach, best quarterback, don't beat themselves, a mother with 2 minutes to go in the game. Third downs, fourth downs, red zone. They're magic. And maybe that in the history of football has always been the case with the best team. But I thought Cincinnati, Jamar Chase losing their cool, giving up the big sack, the pass interference late. You know, again, KC deserved it, but Cincinnati in this spot, which Buffalo's done against this team, which Baltimore's done against this team, beat themselves.
This wouldn't be the end of the world for Cincinnati to lose at Kansas City if they hadn't just blown such an awful game. And I have strong opinions on a lot of coaches. I'm kind of indifferent on Zach Taylor. I don't know much about him. I don't hear him talk that often. I don't hear bad things about him. People like the guy. He clearly has done a pretty good job over the course of his career. But you watch this performance and you go, you should win the division. But you find yourself 0-2. They don't get up for games. They obviously get up for Kansas City. But how do I take you seriously when you lose at home to the Patriots? So they probably should win 10, 11 games if Burrow's healthy, but you put yourself behind the 8 ball, all of a sudden you might be struggling to get a wild card spot.
Well, the good news is Ravens are 0-2 and the Steelers over the course of a season, the Steelers have faced Kirk Cousins and then Bo Nix. So, I mean, Bo Nix is a kid. I mean, there's nothing.
He was bad today. He was bad. And I have money on him to win offensive rookie of the year. He was atrocious.
I want to talk Detroit, Tampa. So, there's the old saying in almost every industry, strike when the iron's hot. So Ben Johnson, Lions OC, is the hottest guy in the league. I've watched them back-to-back weeks. Second half last week, they weren't very good. Against Tampa, Jared Goff threw 55 times, and Tampa had injuries in the back end of their defense. I'm watching them, and I'm like, I mean, Detroit had an edge in first downs and time of possession, and yet something's missing. Like, Goff should not be throwing 55 times a game with an average secondary. That was my take on it.
To me, one thing that stood out in that game, when you watch the two quarterbacks, Baker's not Lamar Jackson, but he can move. Goff cannot.
Yeah.
So when you start hitting Goff, it really rattles him and throws him off. And that happened today. And balls were flying all over the place. Threw a couple awful picks over the middle of the field.
Yep.
He can't ad lib. Like one thing Darnold, like watching Darnold and Purdy, like those guys can move and keep the play alive. Jared Goff cannot.
Yeah.
So if it is not there and it's not there fast, the other thing is I got to give this guy credit. Now he had a good year last year, won a playoff game, and now he's having a good start. Todd Bowles is an excellent defensive coordinator. I mean, excellent. So when you look at that game, you just go Todd Bowles, who's just as a defensive coordinator, non-head coach, he might be the best in the league against Ben Johnson. I think the thing with Ben Johnson, big picture, he turned a lot of people off last year.
Yes.
In the word out, the way he handled things. Listen, if you don't want to leave, you don't want to leave, but he calls them as they're flying to him. It's been bizarre the way that's happened. I still think their talent on offense is so immense that it's going to be hard for that over the course of the season because Jamison Williams had a big play today. You add that to go. St. Brown gets banged up a lot. You watch the Lions, and there's a lot of times where he's coming up, and you're like, he hurt his knee, he hurt his hip, but they got two good running backs. Their offensive line, they should not be struggling to score points, but credit to Tampa. I watch Tampa and go, well, Baker's playing well, and Godwin and Evans are as good of a 1-2 combination. I mean, you got one guy's going to the Hall of Fame, and Godwin, ask Tom Brady about him. He loves a freaking guy. They look good, Colin.
The other thing the Goff lack of mobility, and I like Jared a lot, but
Same.
if you go to the big games in this league, that mobility thing is why Mahomes is hoisting trophies. He had a 45-yard run in last year's Super Bowl. If you look at Jalen Hurts, Allen, Mahomes, the mobility thing's not a small thing. Now, Kyler was off the freaking rails today.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus. It's just insane.
Best game of his life, I think.
Yeah. But the Goff thing isn't a small thing, is that when you get into the second half, so the first half
Cousins is the same, right? They can't move. They're sitting ducks.
So you get into these situations, your first half is largely, the first couple of drives are on script, maybe your third even a bit. Second half is not. It's not just a little thing to say Goff is incapable of moving, because this staff's best coaches are on offense. It's not like Belichick, where Belichick was literally just giving Tom field position, turnovers, and six. Yeah. So Detroit's going to score their way to championships. They're going to be in these shootouts. Well, you're not going to throw for 4 touchdowns in big games. So one of the things that I took away, I wrote in my notes today, Aaron Rodgers is no longer mobile. It completely reduces the Jets' offense, which we'll get to next. But Goff's inability to move, I also wrote this down. Baker now, I don't know if he lost a little weight. I know Lamar lost weight.
He did. I think he did last year. He talked about it.
Yeah, I think Baker's moving better than he's ever moved in his career.
Dramatically. I think, just thinking about Goff, that game that we just witnessed, Cincy and Kansas City, how often those two guys had to scramble to keep plays alive.
Absolutely.
And Mahomes probably a little bit better athlete than Joe, but Joe can move fine. Yep. Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins fall under this category of, they're not like the elite old school pocket quarterbacks, but when they are, they do have time, they can look really good, but it does have to be perfect. And every defensive coordinator hit the guy early and it throws him off. And Goff got hit early and he skipping balls. He was just off. And he he physically is incapable at the NFL level to move around and keep a play alive. Because once the play doesn't hit right away, they either block for an extra couple seconds or they're just screwed. And Cousins falls under the same category. Those players don't really exist anymore, Colin. All the good quarterbacks, they all can move. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Mahomes, Burrow, Purdy, Jalen Hurts. Mobility is a big part of them, because half these plays, these defenders, I mean, not a millionaires on that side. Defensive coordinators making a lot. You have to be able to keep plays alive. He just cannot. Now, I like him better than Cousins, and I like his team better. Yeah. But you saw today, that's the reason maybe the Lions can't win a Super Bowl is you face enough good defenses, you're going to be in trouble, because he gets thrown off. He looks like a different player than when he's really humming.